Hey, welcome back to Wrestling Travels Lockdown Sessions. As always, we are sponsored by a whole lot of cool people. We're sponsored by Wrestle Merch Central over there in the UK, Wrestling Trader. We're working with Style in Profile Designs, powered for TV, for all your wrestling, streaming, watching, whatever you call that. But save 50% on your streaming by entering the code travel in right now. But speaking of, I was gonna say, speaking of savings, but that's not it. Speaking of the show, very lucky today out of Canada, we're gonna welcome Sebastian Suave to the show. Hey, welcome, Sebastian.
Thank you. I love the intro because it's right in line with who I am. I'm the endorsement Sebastian Suave. I am the sponsored athlete of professional wrestling. I love sponsors. I prioritize my sponsors, and I see you guys are doing a fine job giving the sponsors a shout out. So, you get the big thumbs up from me right off the get-go. I love it.
That's awesome. That's what we got. We work with a lot of people, and a lot of people work with us, and I love it. I love just, especially during these times. It's like, man, well, what's cool about wrestling, professional wrestling fans, for the most part, if one person, let's say we're at the top of the mountain, we're going to pull everybody up. Everybody kind of works with each other. That's what's
absolutely, man. I always say this, like a lot of industries are community based, but wrestling being what it is, and I say this in a good way, it's very niche centric. We are a lot more community based than other industries, and it's a good thing. So times like this, if members of the wrestling community are supporting each other, whether it's as fans, as sponsors, as media, podcasts, wrestlers, influencers, the promoters, people, even like names or contractor guys, whether it's showing financial support or just social media coverage, it's very community based. And when someone shows support, the wrestling community in itself really rallies behind that. I mean, you're seeing a lot of that this past year. So absolutely, that's something that's very near and dear to all of us. I think it's that's keeping our sanity. It's kind of staying in touch with that community-based aspect of this industry.
100%. And that the funny story of how we even started doing these interviews is WrestleMania in Tampa Bay got canceled last year. We were supposed to be sponsors of the WrestleMania pub crawl with all the proceeds going towards Connor's cure for pediatric cancer. So obviously everything, no fans, we couldn't go there. But the guy that runs the pub crawl, Jamie, gave me a call on Wednesday night. So if you remember, WrestleMania was on a Saturday and Sunday, and said, hey, I want to do a virtual pub crawl on Twitch with the proceeds going to the Red Cross for the coronavirus. And I'm going, I don't understand a virtual pub crawl. I don't understand Twitch, but yeah, I'm in. So we started doing that, and we raised the pro wrestling fans community like $3,500 at that time, which may not sound like a whole lot, but when you didn't know where your next dollar was coming from, that's a lot of money. And like pro wrestling and wrestling fans just stepping up, and it was a good time. And I'm not sure what's going to happen this year, but we'd be happy to do. I didn't get any sleep that week, just trying to get wrestlers to come on in and do a little 30-second promo. Most people were helpful. A lot of people are like, we don't know who you are, what you do. And I reached out to everybody. So I got to this point, Sebastian, where I had no sleep, and I was just like, F it. I'm going to message like Kevin Von Erich and all these people. And who actually, like a week later, said, oh, hey, Justin, what's going on? And I kind of explained what we were doing. And I know a lot of these guys are worth the money to spend on them, but when I'm like, kind of doing it for charity, it was tough. But that's how these all started, lockdown sessions. And I said, how can I thank these guys, and what can I do for wrestling ourselves? We got a pretty good social platform. So I always think that
shout out to all those people though, because it's something very reflective of the wrestling game. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but wrestling is a rejection game. A lot of fans don't bite what you like as a wrestler in the ring. You got to tweak yourself and find what works. As a promoter, same thing. Fans see your flyers or they see your Facebook ads, even if they're, indie fans. It's like you got to get them to bite. And same thing goes with trying to get sponsors or trying to get guests. It's like, it's a rejection based game and you can't be hurt by it. But it's really great that, you didn't let one or two rejections turn you down. Everyone's got their own reasons, whatever that may be. But that's awesome, because in the big picture, look what you guys did, right? And
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
you can't let that stuff bother you, even if it's a good reason or a piss poor reason.
The tough thing was, I didn't, and I really don't know now, but like Twitch and a virtual pub crawl, like I'm trying to sell this to people and I'm like, I don't really know what I'm talking about. So trying to sell it, but yeah, I reached that point of no return. And, yeah, I get rejected all the time. Rejection's not the bad thing here. Now that I've transitioned from out of the ring into doing this, the bad thing I get is, yeah, I'll do the lockdown sessions.
Yep.
And I'm like, great. You just send me a date and time and we'll set it up. I'll make it work around there. And yep. Yeah, absolutely. I'm definitely interested in doing it. I'm like, all right, cool. Just send me what day are you free? And then we'll work out a time. And then that's like nothing. And I'm like, all right, no, you said you're going to do it. I'm going to stay on you,
Yeah.
So I finally, with Al Snow, who's great, and I love him. Finally, I just said, hey, does Wednesday at 2 p.m. work? And he's like, done. So I think I got to be more.
Yeah, I've done that too. I forgot where I learned that from, but it's like, you always want to be walking on eggshells at first and not offend people, and you want to be a team player and be flexible. But more often than not, when people are given a specific, if they're genuinely free, or even if you need a deadline, it's not rude to ask someone, even if they're doing you a favor and they're going to edit something for you. It's like, hey, do you think you could be done by Friday? And this, let's say 3 days away. It's like, yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. It's not rude. You're being specific, because if they can genuinely do it or they can be available, they'll do it. If they genuinely can't, they'll say so, And I think more often than not, it just gets out the formalities of trying to both sides being flexible or both sides saying, hey, let's circle back to it. Like, if we can specify a time or deadline now, I don't think it offends anyone in the greater. But we generally, as human beings, always, especially when it's not someone like friend or family, it's like a formal or first introduction. We're always trying to be so polite to cater to each other.
Yeah, I'm going to take that away from this interview, is once they say yes, that's setting the hook. I'm just going to try to say, let's, because what I find right now, and maybe you as a, currently out there, is there's been a lot of podcasts and stuff that have really started up. So I'm not so sure. I know everybody's got a lot of time on their hands, but 5 or 6 podcast requests a week has got to be overwhelming.
Yeah, people can have 20,000 podcast requests. It's like, what we got to realize is that we're not for everyone and everyone's not for us. So it's about, who are you for? And are you doing something for the people that care, and focus on that, right? Like, I can't, running a show, I can't worry about, let's say the WWE casual fans, and I'm not dismissing them. I'm saying, if that's not my audience, if they eventually, take a peek and they're curious and they come to a show, great, we're going to welcome them. We're not going to treat them differently. We're going to value them. But, it's kind of like, cold knocking on a door or cold calling. Like, not everyone's interested. Like, they may offer me a product that I'm really interested in, that I could use, and it's a great deal. But the fact that it's a cold call, my guard is up, right? But if they're targeting the people that want said knife or pen that really need it, and it's in their budget, they're going to find that interest. And I look at it the same way. It's like, whether it's a podcast show or a wrestling show, whether it pertains to guests or listeners, I don't care if there's 50,000 podcasts, but if there is a segment of an audience that's interested in everything, if you're strictly a women's wrestling podcast, there's an audience that's interested in that. So who cares if there's 50,000 wrestling podcasts? Or if this one's strictly going to focus on the history of tag wrestling, or this one is particularly focused on what wrestlers are doing during the lockdown. So it's like, you're not you can only be in competition with 50,000 podcasts or 50 other shows if you're just doing the same thing as everyone else, which, not assuming this, but the more vague you are, the more you blend in with everyone else. But if you offer something specific, then you're not really in competition with others. There may be millions of wrestling fans scattered to all these podcasts, but there is an audience out there that gives a shit about the thing you're speaking about, and they are interested. And like, that's like a big approach that I like to take. And that, you know, so yeah, like a lot of people say there's too many podcasts. I'm like, yeah, there's too many wrestling podcasts. Absolutely. And there's probably going to be more, but I don't think there's ever a point of saturation if you're specific and you know who you're targeting, because then you're providing value to people.
Do you pay attention to Tyson Dukes?
Yeah, he's my mentor.
His stuff is
I
awesome.
can tell you the whole history of him mentoring me and the graciousness that I've been bestowed to enter his life and now be one of his best friends. And you know, speaking about this whole specific thing, it's one thing I love about him, and it was a piece of like advice I wanted to give him coming out of the pandemic, like, because he's so unique. And like but the funny thing is, the advice I wanted to give him, I started to notice that he was embodying it on social media. I'm like, oh shit. So the way I look at it is, Tyson is like almost like one of those cliche last of a dying breed. He's old school, and he's not old school in a way that's outdated. He's always been at, like 15 years ago, like when I was just a student, maybe 13 years ago, he was like the godfather of Canadian wrestling. He was the man. And then, you know, wrestling evolves, the times change, all these young and up and comers come, and then he gets in better shape and he wrestles better. And then everyone's like, he's in his prime. 5 years later, he's in his prime. 5 years later, he's somehow always in his prime and getting better. He's evolving and adapting with the times, but he never compromises who he is and his identity, right? And he's always been good with that. But like, my belief was that coming out of this lockdown and this whole pandemic, he should double down on that, because he like, if you know Tyson Dukes, the human being, he is kind, he is gracious, he gives younger wrestlers an opportunity to get stuff in, and even in a loss look good. He takes pride in adapting to different styles, and I think that's fine. But that selflessness, sometimes what ends up happening is, to really dumb it down to a cliche, everyone to some extent is aspired to be a show stealer. And there's nothing wrong with the evolved style of wrestling. I'm all for it. But Tyson is so different. I don't want him to. I want him to double down on, you know, doing more chain wrestling, doing more submissions that break someone down, being more old school. And like, it's funny. It's like his identity and his belief is almost a double-edged sword, in the sense that he's out there on social media teaching daily YouTube videos of all these grassroots holds. And he is showing all these videos of the little intricacies, and he's promoting that you can he's not saying don't do the new school, do the new school, but don't forget your fundamentals. Don't like lose sight of these little tweaks. And the beautiful thing about that is, like, on one end, I want him to educate people out there because he's bettering the business. And not everyone has to be doing that style, the old school technical chain wrestling, but it's nice for that information to be there and not be extinct, if you know what I mean, right? So in one sense, I would love if there's a bunch of wrestlers out there who learn what he has to offer. But at the same time, I would almost like them not to, because it makes him even more unique, right? So as a promoter or a booker on my shows, I don't want there to be no one else like Tyson Dukes. And I want him to speak like that. He's like, they don't make them like me anymore. You can't be like me. He's like, I'm a machine. There's a reason I'm called a cyborg. There's a reason I was called a textbook. I will break you. I will snap you. I'm not looking to steal the show. I'm not looking for holy shit chance. I'm not looking for a 5-star match. I'm looking to win in 15 seconds, and I will break you, whether you are a rookie or a veteran, in 15 seconds. I know your weaknesses, and I have none. You know, like that kind of mentality. And it's like, fans, you know, we're not looking for the best wrestler or the coolest character. He's just different. As I wanted to preach that to him, I said, hey, man, I was going to say this to you, but the way you're conducting yourself these days, it's exactly what I would love to see more of. It's like, and it's funny because he was always my mentor. He was always passing the advice to me. And here I was excited for once to impart the wisdom back to him, although he's always opens his ears to me. And I'm like, man, this motherfucker, the one time I was going to give him great advice, he's doing it, you know? And that's great. And it's a lesson, I think, to any wrestler. It's not that you have to be old school. It's that, and it's not to compromise or not be a chameleon of sort with so many sets of skills. It's that you need that thing to stand out. You need that identity. And beyond that, have at it with everything else. You know, whether it's for your selfish pleasure or whether it's because you want to showcase that you can do more. But you need that thing that makes you special and different. And for Tyson, it's that. And it's, again, it's the same thing for promotion or podcast. It's like, why, you know, if someone's going to go to 8 shows a month because they're a diehard fan, it's like they have the money, but which of those 8 companies is, I'm going there whether I have the money or not? If I'm on vacation and I want to schedule it around one company, if, you know, these 8 wrestlers are on 4 of those companies, if, you know, whatever the reason be, maybe they don't have the big main event feature. There's something about that company that, you know, for me, it's not acceptable to miss on the good days and the bad days. And usually that comes to things like community, brand identity, right? The easy answer is like if you're in the Midwest and Shimmer is a women's promotion, it's not that it's better than the others or worse than the others, it's that it's different. And, you know, you're not going to get the experience that you get at Shimmer elsewhere. And, you know, another easy one for you guys is with Warrior One. It's like what they offer is hard to find anywhere else, period. So, you know, there's various ways of having that unique identity. And like Tyson embodies that, like, you know, top to bottom. And it's never a guy who rejects everything else. He's a guy who, it's like he's like almost like a philosopher, right? He's willing to debate and question, and because like I've seen him endorse and embrace and hug and ask people to push people of all styles, big, small, old school, new school, character, non-character. It's just a matter of if like there's so much pride for him in the fundamentals and the traditions of wrestling. It's like a historian, right? You respect how things evolve in society, but you don't want people to take away at the key fundamentals of history that have bettered or defined your society, or in this case, his sport, right? And that's a really fun debate or philosophy to have without getting offended, right? Because wrestling brings you so many different aspects and styles, and it's fun to have those conversations, right? It just, without getting offended, you got to respect that wrestling has so many different elements. That's an acquired taste.
100%. He was very gracious to be one of my first guests. And one of the things I usually end up just talking about wrestling, I was talking about like the forgotten or hidden moves and stuff that and that's kind of what he's doing now. Because I had brought up, you know, it's been a long time since I had seen somebody do an atomic drop. I had, you know, a hammer lock, a top wrist lock, all this stuff. And now I can watch, he started doing his podcast little by little. And now currently he's doing a lot of really good things that I always tell everybody I know, like, there's some good stuff to put in your toolbox, you know, right here. And he's giving it away. But, you know, people are, what I thought would happen with a lot. Now, I trained old school a long time ago, but I think what happens is now I paid, you know, X thousands of dollars to go to a accredited person. And now, you know, here in Wisconsin, I could buy a ring tomorrow and call myself a promoter. And therefore I could think, well, hey kid, I'll train you for $500. Well, what are you getting from me for $500? And you got to come here and set up the ring early, and I'll give you 20 minutes here and there. You're going to miss all these things that fall. And sometimes it's not even the kid's fault, the young guy training, because he's got no, you know, I'm watching wrestling. I don't know whether it's these guys are trained or not, but I want to do it. But, you know, and a lot of people have started out in the backyards, but have realized I need to get further educated and stuff. And I'm going off on a tangent, but I just love
it. I mean, I think it's a passionate discussion, whether you're in the business or on the other side of the curtain, right? And there's both sides of the argument usually bring some credit. I know some people who haven't been trained properly, but eventually they polished. Now, at first, they weren't even close to polished, but some of them eventually went to a school. Even if it was an incredible school, the veterans who would walk in that school were good. Or as they got on the indies, through the repetition of working polished workers and polished veterans and working in front of better crowds, there's various ways of receiving education. It's like I can go to a college and receive an education, or I can invest my time in going to a shit ton of seminars and conferences, or let's say in sales. It's nice to go to school and learn about sales, but you can also go to a sales job that's very competitive and get your ass handed to you and embarrass yourself 100 times and learn your skill sets there, right? Now, there's various ways of getting better, but at the end of the day, I think there are some fundamental principles in any industry that matter no matter who you are, right? And you can have your own identity, your own style in sales or marketing or whatever you do, but there are some irrefutable fundamentals that matter. And like for wrestling, that's where, like I've always told young guys, like even if you don't train at Tyson school, go to a school and get a couple of reps with them, because just knowing those little things, like I think with Tyson, you learn the little tendencies in your lockups and your chain holds about footwork and intensity and ring positioning. And that carries beyond the move you learn. Like Tyson, as an easy example, he was teaching me one or two very basic moves. There was a modifier, I think, front face lock, and there was another chain hold where you got it, then you position the guy for a European or something. And what blew my mind was it wasn't that Tyson just grabbed the hold with intensity, but he positioned the guy where he wanted to. So typically, if people can get a mental image of this, like if you grab someone and hypothetically you want him in the ropes, a lot of people grab the guy in the hold, and then they quarter turn with small footsteps, and it looks like, and they make their way through. What Tyson does is he can literally pick any of the 4 ropes, and what he'll do is he won't go for the hold. He'll stun the guy with the strike. He'll put his 2 hands clenched around the guy's neck, and he'll shimmy him and walk him with it's almost like his chest and forearms are trapping the head. And when he gets to the ropes or closer to the ropes, then he'll grab the hold, or then he'll go for the European. And that blew my mind. It's like he's teaching me about intensity and how to grab a hold. But now, like, one thing that can't escape my mind is if I'm going for a reverse whip out of one corner, I don't need to walk the guy there. I don't need to give him a courtesy few strikes. I can literally clench him in any kind of hold I want. And as long as the hold looks believable, other than being a formality, you can rather than just grab, let's say, a wrist lock or ringing the arm, you can ring out the arm and then start applying your forearm as pressure on the arm as you guide the guy towards the corner. And then maybe you drop the elbow on the arm, or you give the guy one shot there. It just as human beings, we're creatures of being of replicating others and copycat, right? And wrestling is more so. So if 1,000 wrestlers, whether it's on TV or not, walk a guy to the corner holding the wrist, or they give like 3 courtesy jabs, 99% of us going to the corner are going to do that. Or we're just going to like chop the guy and say sell to the corner, which there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is it's either going to be lazy, or it's going to be identical to what everyone else is doing, which then loses its, its escapism and its like disillusion of like being a combat. But then when you see Tyson, he wants to get a guy in a corner. He drops the forearm on the guy's neck. He goes down. He forces the guy back up to his feet. He clenches with the forearms, right? And he, rather than walk him right away, he yanks on the neck once. He yanks the neck twice. So it looks like he's trying to destroy the guy's neck, right? And then he suddenly, as the guy's weakened, now he's walking into the corner. And now he's going to maybe throw a Euro or ring out the arm for the whip. And that in itself, there's just a natural flow of believability. And, those holds are not like transitional holds, right? You're not walking the guy to the corner. You're not holding the hold or the wrist to walk to the corner, or you're not giving a forearm to make the guy sell back, which is essentially what it is. Every fan knows it's like, all right, he's giving enough forearms or punches to make the guy sell back to the ropes. When Tyson's wrenching that neck, it looks like he's trying to rip the guy's neck off. And now that he's weakened, now he's going to go for the whip. And that's what I love. It's like, that was a big rant for me, but it's like, it's really hard in a sentence or two to explain what's really unique about Tyson. People watch him and they go, well, yeah, he's going to teach me how to be more intense with a front face lock. It's like, yes and no. If your front face lock doesn't have any intensity or like your footwork isn't as polished, yeah, you can work on that. But beyond that, once you understand the how and the why and the whens of what he does, every little to big thing you do, like you can go for those big falsy sequences and it could be intricate and high flying, but those little dynamics of what you learn from Tyson, it really impacts it. That's where I think some of the more accomplished wrestlers right now, they do, it's like, it's really hard to pinpoint why, despite the fact that they do, let's say, a lot of high flyer falsies, that it just looks so polished and so awesome compared to other guys who do the same thing. And it doesn't have that same feeling. It just feels like a lot. It's because those other guys, and like Pac's a good example, is like, there's no wasted movement. Everything is intense. Everything is purposeful. There's never a hold or a form that looks like it's just transitional to get to the next spot, you know? And yeah, it's a bit of a lost art, and you need guys like Tyson to really understand. The beauty is, like, when you learn from Tyson, like I said, you're not learning to replicate exactly what it is. You're understanding the psychology and the footwork and all that, and you can make it, you can use it to your own like style and your own match buildup, right?
Yeah, 100%. One of the things I always say, and I usually don't, I'm not one that walks in the locker room and goes, "Let me tell you advice." But when I was up there last 2 summers ago now, 2019,
Yeah.
I got a chance, Northern Championship Wrestling up in near Montreal. Jeff Rossett said, "Hey, can we go wrestling travel?" I was traveling with our owner, and I'm going, he's a wrestling fan. I'm like, "Have you ever seen wrestling training?" And he goes, "No." I said, "All right, let's go." We had already talked to Santino. He was going to let us come and watch Battle Arts. I go, "But now let's show you how, that's a nice place. That's a great facility. But now we're going to walk into this hole in the wall and watch these guys train them." It must have been the humidity ridiculous. But some of the guys I was talking to and some of the guys I'm still friends with now, I'm like, I always watch from that mid calf down, watch the feet. And I was telling, these guys were like, "Do you have any advice for us?" I go, "Watch your trainer. He gets to where he wants to be." You're talking about not wasting any movement. But I said, to me, and everybody's different, but to me, once my brain goes, "Okay, I don't have to think about my feet right now.
Yeah,
now I can concentrate up here." It's like learning in pieces. Once this is coming automatic, now I can do this. Because that's the one thing I know with young guys and with me too. It's like, okay, your feet were wrong, your hands weren't here, this and that. And now your next try, you're going to try to fix everything all at once. And it's not going to, you got to kind of break it down, in my opinion. If it happens, it happens. But for the most part, I don't know anybody that just.
You said it right. It's you need autopilot, but your autopilot doesn't come with repetition if you don't understand what you need to do. Once you're taught proper footwork, once you're taught proper technique, once you understand ring positioning, then you won't pick it overnight, but now you know how it's gonna, what you need to aspire to. Right. And then when the autopilot kicks in, you're Tyson. And that's the great part. It's like between all his spots, it's not like everything is rehearsed to a T or spoken out to a T. It's like he'll give you a whip, and let's say he gives you a hip toss, and then maybe like the next thing is they're working a corner spot. In between, there might be a 20-second of like just freestyling, but that's going to be generated based on the crowd reaction and how you feel and your intensity, or what you and your opponent expose to each other. And the great thing is, he doesn't even have to think about it. It's autopilot, right? That footwork, and that's, like I said, it's all dependent on where your opponent sells to. Sometimes that's really it. It's like, I may give a move and I'm like, okay, it's time for the whip, and I'm like, well, he's exposed, his ribs, and maybe I'm going to kick the ribs and work it with a few punches since I've established that, I dropped a few rib breakers or stuff. It's just, it's in the moment, right? And then maybe you go for a hold and you work the hold there, and it's not very much robotic where you're trying to force your opponent out of like. And that's the great thing with Tyson. If he's working a younger guy who's like, well, that's not the next spot, and he's tight, it doesn't matter. Tyson, it won't be awkward. He'll literally pick you up and put you where he wants. Like I said, I love that, like that neck clench. I've stolen it from him, because like you can literally dictate where your opponent is going, and that's the beautiful thing. Like, my opponent might visualize themselves coming off this rope, and I'm like, you know what? For the sake of it, I can just work you and then work you to that rope just for the sake of going off that rope, and it won't look awkward, because the selling and the foot positioning and the controlling of the body, it looks like a battle. There's an objective to each move. You made us
100%.
a Tyson Dukes Appreciation Day.
I know. I was like, we gotta talk about Sebastian Suave. We gotta. Oh, well, I'll definitely tag Tyson in this. This when we put it out on Twitter. So,
bastard, huh?
yeah, so he can give us back some love here. Where So how long have you been in the business? We're gonna start.
It's been roughly 13 years, 13 maybe years. Off a couple months or a year, but I trained for a year when I was 20, started doing shows, and I guess it was about 5 years in. Yeah, 5 years in, I started promoting. Originally ran a charity show just because I wanted to do a charity component, and they said, well, what do you have good connections to? What do you have, like, tie? And I was like, shit, wrestling. Okay, I guess it's doing a wrestling show. And it was pretty successful, and it was fun doing it. And got to do it a second time a year later, and the next thing I know, it's I was helping my wrestling school because at the time they had a merger. And, you know, I'm not saying this in a bitter way, but the reality was a lot of people on our side of the merger felt that the talent on our side were either not getting booked or getting proper spots. So all the veterans and rookies on our side, or the students, they didn't have, you know, a platform to look forward to. And I offered my trainer to run shows under the school names banner instead. And I said, I'll just book prominently just all the alumni and the students. And I added one or two of my close friends just to give it a little flavor. And about after, I think, a year of doing that, one of the other veteran wrestlers there were helping co-promote. I knew the school was in good hands. I never, you know, I did well with those shows, but I never went 120% because as I was promoting and booking, I'm like, I had a very specific vision of, this is what my promotion would be called. This is how I would book it. This is what would be different about it. And I'm like, and I couldn't really pull the trigger on that because the whole basis of the promotion was the school, students, and alumni. And, you know, me coming in there to do to do like 80% of the roster not being them or more, it's like, it doesn't go in hand with the, you know, the original intent of those shows. And then after getting the blessing from my trainer, I decided to pull off Smash Wrestling. The first show, I think, was October 28, 2012. So I think we got a good 7.5 years there before the pandemic, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. And we kind of blew up inadvertently after our second show, and then somewhere between the 6th and 7th, 8th show, it really started taking away. And I think somewhere in a year or year and a half, we went from just, I think we've had a few big pivoting points, but I think our initial first two pivoting points is we had Gargano and Kevin Owens in our second show ever. And we had a fairly stacked card that like sold out the building on our second show. And when I kept moving with that momentum, I think it was about maybe 10, 11 months later, our big pivoting point was Chris Hero got released. And we had worked with Lance Storm once because we ran a show all the way up north in Nunavut, which is like northern Canada, where like no one ever lives and like could fly or drive. And it was a unique experience for Lance Storm, so we had him part of those shows. And I had the itch to try to have Chris Hero's match with us be different from all the other indie matches he had. And I thankfully managed to pique Lance Storm's curiosity. So we had two back-to-back shows where first we had Chris Hero versus Lance Storm, and AJ just got released. AJ Styles got released from TNA at the time, or left, whatever it was. And so leading into that show, we managed to book AJ versus Chris Hero, which followed the same concept of AJ's going to work a bunch of the local guys at a bunch of promotions. What can we stand out with? It's going to be AJ versus Chris Hero. And not only that, but at the end of the Chris Hero Lance Storm show, we'll have a banner when Chris Hero wins with the pictures of Chris Hero and Lance Storm. Lance Storm's face disappears, AJ Styles' face appears, and it gave us a little continuity rather than, you know, lucking out once every 5 years for a big show. Was these guys are running these two high-profile shows back to back, and we kind of invested in the rest of the roster throughout those two cards. But when the opportunity presents yourself, you gotta kind of swing big. And sometimes you swing big, sometimes you miss, and sometimes when you swing big, you know what, you connect and it's successful, but it isn't a pivot point as much as you'd want to. It's successful, but you just really got to keep swinging big without, you know, losing your shirt. And you got to have just faith that every now and then some of those swings are gonna, pay off in the long term. And thankfully those kind of shows profited, but even if they broke even or lost money, the amount of fans that came to us as of that show that chose to be VIP ticket holders who consistently gave you your best ticketing price and loyalty, and how they promoted you without asking them to, promote you or to put Facebook ads. There's that authentic loyalty of investing their time, their money, their voice. And you can't really put a price on that. So even if you lost money, those are those big pivoting points. So that's kind of like a summary 101 of, I'm missing a lot of key moments, Smash history, but like that's the gist of how I started and how we got into our pivot points early on. And it was kind of a thankful, I don't want to call it a coincidence. There was good effort and work put into it, but those good moments happened, and it set us down a good path in the long term.
No, actually, I got to see Smash versus Progress.
That was another big pivot point. I just didn't want to rant.
The
first one or the second one?
The one 2019 SummerSlam.
Yeah. The first time we did it with Progress, we I want to maybe say 2016, 2017, I'm guessing. But it was when they were at their, I don't want to say the peak of their buzz, but they were fairly like, they were getting that mainstream crossover in the US. And we managed to bring in for 2 or 3 shows in all our primary markets. That was a massive game changer for us. And SummerSlam weekend was another example, I'll be quick about it. But, SummerSlam's in Toronto, and WrestleMania usually has their big weekends, and a lot of companies can make their, their impression those weekends. So we treated SummerSlam 2019 as that for us. It's like, it's not Mania, but, there's still like companies who run around SummerSlam, and it's like, we can't just run our show. Let's bring some big players to the dance. And it was successful from a branding perspective and from a financial perspective. It wasn't the home run we imagined, but, we had a total of 8 shows with other partners, and some of them were big and some of them weren't. And some of them that were successful, like there wasn't a ripple effect of benefits. And some of them that were so-so, like we still have incredible networks and friendships that have benefited us beyond those weekends. So all in all, it was worth it. But, again, that's a perfect example of a lot of people can run a SummerSlam or WrestleMania weekend, and it doesn't give you the desired result. And we were thankful that he gave us a little bit of column A and B.
Yeah.
That was a fun weekend. It was crazy.
I had a blast. Yeah, John Briley, let me come in and do some things, just film it. I got so much footage on my phone, and we brought travelers, obviously, when you could travel people from the UK, and I'm going, hey, this isn't part of your tickets are for SmackDown Raw. But I go, those guys, I said, you're going to go to the Met Theater there and watch wrestling like you've never seen it before, because you're right there. What was there? I think there was no such thing as a third row there. On some sides there were stage side stuff, but you were you packed a lot of people.
Depending which show, the 2 wall sides had either 3 or 4 rows. And
you caught me in my mind.
The other 2 sides had more rows, and then there was a bunch of standing. But yeah, it's like, we love that. Like what we try to do is sometimes, like, rather than, even in other venues, rather than create like 6 rows deep, we'd rather have 3 rows or 4 rows wide, because it's like if you and I and a bunch of people talk spaced out, it's different from if we're all gathered in a circle, right? And like within respecting fire codes, you want people closer to the ring, right? And kind of create that kind of, it's like going to like a indie concert, right? Like there may be room in the room for like 200 people spaced out, but you want those 200 people all close and up front and feeling it and getting the energy off the people beside them, not being 6 feet apart, right?
Yeah, it was fantastic. So of course I was exaggerating a little bit, but thank you for calling me out on it. But the fact that I was telling people that you're gonna watch, if you've only watched wrestling in an arena, now you're right there. And the fact that I always tell people, indie wrestling, the fact that you're gonna have an intermission and you're gonna be able to go up to some of your favorite wrestlers, or that they might have been your favorite before you got there, or they might have caught your eye in their match. You're going to be able to go up, shake a hand, buy a t-shirt, get an autograph. And that was doing it on a big time scale for me. I'm used to your local indie show maybe brings in 1 or 2 guys, But watching that action between Smash and Progress was awesome.
It's fun. You know, those weekends I find like it's very rewarding in the sense that it's kind of a fun experience for the wrestlers, the staff. Like the first time we had Progress with us, it was like 3 days in a row. So I think they were with us for like 3.5 days. And for the wrestlers and the staff, like they're feeling the crowd like into it like no show we've ever had before. And that specific weekend, I remember the first show we had in Toronto of the double miter. The first match we had Mark Andrews versus one of our guys, Scotty O'Shea, and like they set the tone for the whole weekend, not just for that show, not just for that half, like the whole weekend. It was like, did we just have our like match of the whole weekend right off the get go? And the camera ops, our announcers, commentators, everyone's the editor, like the wrestlers, the referees, everyone's smiling and nodding and like this is good. And the guys from Progress are looking at us and like they know that this is good and like it's kind of cool because like and then between the shows we go out and grab a bite together and whatnot. And it's like wrestling. It's still fun when you have a one shot show. You go into you drive into town, you talk shop backstage, you have the show, you leave. But when you get an opportunity on like these wrestling weekends to kind of like share a locker room more than once, share a hotel more than or a bite at a restaurant more than once, and kind of like enjoy each other's company. For me, it's like being with WXW just before the pandemic, and in the UK was a lot of fun. And like, and trust me, this is not just for the sake of name dropping, but like after like one or two of the shows, like the hotel had its bar, and then like I'm sitting there with Jeff Cobb, who we've had a few times, and I like the guy, and I get the sense that he likes me, but it's like I'm always running around as booker / promoter / wrestler, right? And Thatcher is a guy that I know has a lot of respect of my peers and stuff, and I get to sit there with him and Thatcher Cobb and Ishikawa. We're like grabbing beers and sharing stories and laughing. I'm like, and it was Tarek or Brett who's there with me, one of the pillars, and I was like, this is what wrestling's about. I'm not trying to diminish the in-ring stuff, but it's like we go out there, we have a great show together, and then we appreciate each other as human beings afterwards. Like it's you can't appreciate the moment without the other, right? We can all hang out and be great company and be funny, but it's not the same without the wrestling show happening first, and vice versa. We can go enjoy a kick-ass show and be proud of it and shake hands or hug and leave. It's not the same, but going out there and doing what we do best and enjoying the large audience and the big night and getting the adrenaline off of matches and then going and hanging out. It's like it's like we spoke right off the get-go, an element of community, right? It's we all hang out with friends and enjoy that, and we all have good matches if we're wrestlers at some point or another. But to have both, it's like you really understand the sense of community and like the brotherhood, as the cliche is, right? And Absolutely. It's like times like that I try not to take for granted. It's like some guys are like, I gotta go home. Like I'm like, brother, I work on this company more than 40 hours a week. I got 2 kids. I got a wife who doesn't like my schedule sometimes. I'm like, I got to drive 6 hours. I'm like, it's like, just spare 20 minutes. It's like, you'll regret it when it's not there. It's the same thing as like, whether it's doing interviews or shaking a fan's hand and taking a picture. It's like, I think things become stagnant over time because you've done a lot, but like when it's not there, you'll take it for granted. And truthfully, you don't know which interactions will be meaningful without experiencing them. You don't know which fan will leave a lasting impression or say something or show a gesture that goes the extra mile. And you never know which interview you do that, whether it's what you brought to the table or what they brought to the table, puts a smile on your face or helps you, especially now. It's like a lot of people are down because there is no wrestling happening. And when you have these conversations, you're talking wrestling, right? And it lights that spark of that fire of like, it's like, all right, I missed the business. It was nice to talk shop. It was nice to, like, you and I are smiling talking about Tyson, right? It's nice to have those conversations because we're not at a show, we're not in a ring, right? And that's something that you can't take for granted,
100%. Like before, like scheduling these interviews, and usually like the hour before, I'm always like, okay, I'm going to try to keep this at like, 15 minutes. And, you don't know anybody really. But then I get into these and, talking with you, and it's like, I feel like we're in the same room. We're on the same wavelength. One of the things, when I was a kid, I used to go to wrestling, the AWA around here, and I know the AWA ran up there in Canada as well, but I had autographs and pictures with, a lot of the guys that have gotten lost throughout the years. But it was 2 years ago. I drove an hour and a half to a show to buy a ticket as a fan and a lot of people will say, "Oh, you're a mark." And I go, "Yeah, I am. We all are."
Yeah,
But
why
I'm
did
like,
we get in the business and put our bodies on the line and sacrifice lives? Because we were obsessed.
and I'm like, 79-year-old Baron von Raschke is there taking pictures and signing autographs.
Yeah.
And you damn sure I wasn't going to miss that. And
Yeah.
the best thing is I showed pictures to friends, and one of the comments I got on Facebook was, Baron looks great. Like he could go today. Clapper? Maybe not. But yeah, 79 years old, and the guy still out there, and just, the kid in you. The kid in me was just like, dude, this is like, how am I not nervous really talking to anybody? We're all kind of on the same wavelength. And then there's Baron, who's the nicest guy in the world, looking at me, and I'm just, I pulled it off. But inside, I'm just the butterflies. So who, which leads me to my next question. That's the first time I've been able to segue. Not just here, but any interview.
That's on me.
Who, when you're a young Sebastian Suave, who are you watching? Who catches your eye when you first start watching?
It evolved over time for sure. So like from what I was told, and I vaguely remember when I got into wrestling at 4 or 5, my youngest uncle, he showed me wrestling, and from what I recall is like I was in awe of Roddy Piper. And I assume it's just because he was so animated and loud and crazy. And, it's the same reason to some extent I think people fell in love with Hulk Hogan. I mean, great character and, say your prayers, eat your vitamins, but at the same time, it's just this larger-than-life character, and he's wild and he's crazy. And it's like, but I think whether it's just the right time, the right place, maybe it was a Hogan promo, it'd be Hogan. Would be the guy to be lose, but it was a Piper promo. And my uncle got me that old WWF blue wrestling ring for my 5th or 6th birthday. And if anyone recalls the Hulk Hogan, his arms were like this and you pulled back, they clamped together. Piper had the uppercut, hacksaw with the 2x4 would come down. I think there was an Ultimate Warrior with the gorilla press hands, and there was 1 or 2 more. I think maybe Boss Man was in there. Maybe I'm wrong about Mr. Perfect, but I remember those 4 were there. And I played with those 6 figures, and inevitably at 6, 7, if you, at least here in Canada, if you watched Saturday morning cartoons like me, it's like my Monday to Friday, I go to school, I watch a bit of cartoons, I play sports, whatever, play with toys. Like, it wasn't crazy TV. Saturday mornings, my parents knew it was all in. I wake up 7. Dragon Ball Z was the first one up because pretty much I keep waking up earlier to intake more Saturday morning cartoons. My ceiling for how early I was willing to wake up was once it wasn't a cartoon. So whatever was on at 6:30 was not a cartoon, but at 7 o'clock it was Dragon Ball Z, and I'd hammer my way through to noon. And cartoons would end at noon. Well, wait a second. WWF Superstars was on for an hour or whatever it was at noon. So that was like, it's crazy. I would never let my children, and it's like, not to diminish my amazing parents who were 5 stars, but like 7 to 1 p.m. I'm like there in front of the TV, but it was like, it's like watching a good card, right? You go to a wrestling show, you can't leave before the main event. So my mentality is like, I'm going to watch all these cartoons, but I'm not going to turn off TV because the main event for me is wrestling at noon. And so at that point, I was born in 86. So I'm assuming here it's maybe 92, 93, 94, 95. And Shawn Michaels is the bee's knees to me, right? He's the coolest cat in the house. And so I was a Shawn Michaels guy. Till today, I chirp with a lot of Canadians who rightfully so think Bret Hart's the man. And I like to chirp a little that Shawn Michaels was the better wrestler. And like in college, my roommate was a diehard wrestling fan, and he was always like a Bret Hart guy. And I trash talk him about how Shawn Michaels was the man. So, you know, a lot of respect, obviously, for both guys. But I'd say Shawn Michaels was my guy. And then as I became a teenager, it was Kurt Angle. I don't know why, but like Kurt Angle and Eddie Guerrero. I think at that point when you're a teenager, just like with anything else in life, you sometimes open up to liking bad guys or edgy guys, right? And Eddie and Kurt were amazing baby faces, but when it came to their heel work, it's just next level stuff. And maybe it was just I was trying to be a bit of a contrarian in high school because we used to have pay-per-view parties, and like those of us that were either diehard or casual fans or guys who just wanted to hang out with everyone else for the wings and the pay-per-view. Everyone would love The Rock and Austin and all that. So I guess maybe it was a contrarian, but like Angle was my guy, and Eddie had a good heel run too. So and Jericho was if you're Canadian, I think Jericho played an influence on you no matter what. But yeah, these were the key guys for me. And I think like I wasn't too exposed to the indies. It's like I think when you're a kid, like it's WWF, WWE is like the only wrestling you know, and then you go down the rabbit hole, right? For me, it was like you love wrestling so much, then you check it out on the internet and you want WWE news or WWF news at the time. And then that website eventually carries some news on something called Ring of Honor, and you're like, what is this Ring of Honor we speak of? And then you get into enough of that, and then you hear about like you see a flyer at a local show, and you're like, you see Tyson Dukes on the flyer, and you're like, what's this backyard wrestling? I'm not going to that. And then a month later, you're like, this guy is the greatest wrestler I've ever seen in my life, right? And yeah, but like I didn't even comprehend ever becoming a. I'll segue for you. It's like, how did I become a wrestler? I thought you just had to go to the States and go to OVW or to Florida with WWF, and there was no other wrestling school in the world. And then I went to this indie show in Toronto by chance of like the websites and dirt sheets. Like, there's a wrestling show in Toronto, and it had a Mexican star on it. And then I found out that there's a wrestling school locally affiliated with it. At that point, I'm like throwing my hat. I'm like, shut the fuck up. There's a wrestling school in Canada, in Toronto. And like my whole lifetime, I always just assumed I'd never be a wrestler because you mentally tell yourself what everyone else tells you, right? You're too small. It's too dangerous. It's 1 out of a million people. So, and you're too embarrassed to admit to people that that's your dream. And then, but the second there was the reality that there is a wrestling school in your city, I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna find out how much it costs. I'm gonna save up the money, and I'm gonna do this. And like, at least I know I gave it a shot. And then, the rest is history. But like, I think that may happen for a lot of people. Like, maybe some people are as obsessed in wrestling as I was, and at 30 they start, or 35 they find out about the indies, and they're like, I wish I knew. I would have gone and trained at a wrestling school. I didn't know there was a wrestling school in 2 hours. Like, I was lucky enough to just come across the fact that there was a wrestling school. But it's like that, and that's the thing. We're so niche that like it's like underground music. There's this whole scene that some people may not be aware of that is skilled, that's rowdy, that has a community, has growth, has quality, has production, has an impact, has a cultural impact, but you're not aware of it, And fortunately for me, fortunately with the way the scene is today, with all the digital content, I think it really tells you how times have changed, where WWE on their network are carrying some independence, and it's like it's giving a wrestling fan that rabbit hole where maybe they just check Progress or WXW or Evolve, and next thing you know, they know that there's a small independent wrestling show in Idaho or Edmonton, Canada, or wherever, right? Like, and next thing you know, they're at a wrestling school locally.
Absolutely. I always trying to talk fans into going to shows, and I'll get hey, I've always wanted to go to a show.
Yeah.
But there's that amateur wrestling that's happening at the high school, and I'm like, that's not, guys, that's professional wrestling. I go there and talk to people, and you're gonna learn this guy was trained by this guy, and you're gonna find a few legends. And I can't. It's hard pressed to find anybody that's a fan that goes live to an indie show that comes out of there going, I wish I hadn't gone. And that's hats off to I think we froze up.
I think the beauty of indie wrestling, especially when you have some, like, not to diminish some performers, but if you have the elite performers and you also have production and you've created a culture and a community, right? So there's regular fans, right? And there are certain towns that Smash Wrestling is a new show and the crowd isn't educated, and that's fine. It's like you run different kind of shows, right? You may run a show at a fair, you may go into a small town where it's a casual kind of show with like yays and boos. But if you bring a non-wrestling fan to the PWG kind of environment, which requires highly skilled talent, which requires not all the time, but sometimes good production. And then you add the element of a rabid audience, an educated audience, right? So like you take a bunch of people and bring them to a music concert. It could be a rock, death metal concert, and they've never seen this band or they really don't attend concerts. They're going to sit there and nod their head and clap. But if you got people who regularly go to these concerts and they know the culture and they know the stage diving and they know the chants and they know how to like that when the front man's riling you up, you know how to rile back with them, right? You go there as a non-rock fan or not a fan of this band, you are witnessing this culture, this community vibe. And I think that's what's beautiful about independent wrestling is, and I see it with a lot of my friends and family, they're not fans of wrestling. And then after the event, they're probably not going to catch it on TV. And if they do, they shrug it. But when they're at the event, they're seeing guys dive over the ropes about 5 feet in front of them onto another guy. They're hearing the chop and they're seeing the red handprints on the guy's chest. And something crazy happens, this big driver move, and the guy kicks out and the crowd's chanting, holy shit, holy shit. And, you know, I can be at a yarn knitting contest, and if 500 people around me are chanting holy shit, I may get goosebumps and kind of join in because it's not diminishing the yarn knitting or the wrestling. There's an energy in here.
Right.
And there's enclosed walls and you're feeling the energy and the lighting is there and the sound of the chops are there. And like, and that's one of the things that I love about wrestling. It's a reason why I like intensity in wrestling. I'm not saying let's hurt each other. Cool moves and technical wrestling, I'm all for. I love Tyson and I love technical wrestling myself. But things that are intense, when Benoit would come out with the forearms or you hear a chop, like Walter's style is a good example. Kyle O'Reilly's style is a good example. They're all different athletes with different styles, but when there's an intensity element, you don't say wow, you say this ooh. So you're not marking out or popping, you are sympathizing. Your human reaction is an instinct of like, that's gotta hurt. Like, you know, seeing a guy take, like if you see a guy fly off the top rope off a springboard and in midair he just gets powerbombed down, your human nature is to be like, oh fuck, like, you know, that guy. And that's what I love. And that's why non-wrestling fans can enjoy wrestling, because they come there up front and they see it and they hear it and they're like on TV, maybe that's a padded bed, but up front we're like, I don't care how padded that thing is, that guy just got drove into that mat. And and they associate, if that was me, I would not be getting up. They're not even being sarcastic. They're like, I physically would not be getting up. So like, there's an association as a human being where like, that's impressive, that's gotta hurt, I couldn't do that. And like, there's that shock value element of seeing it up close and like personal, like you just said. And that's why I love that. Like, they don't have to like wrestling. What this is, it's the same thing as me going to a hip hop concert, a rock concert, or something else. I'll give you it. I can't stand country for whatever reason. But if I go to, I have some friends that love country, and if I go there and the crowd singing with the band and there's beers flowing and there's a fun element of wordplay with the crowd and people are high-fiving and like people are stage diving, I may stage dive, have a beer, and like try to sing along piss poorly because you're feeling the environment, right? And that's the fun part. It's like people can come to a wrestling show and it's not really, for the majority of the crowd, it's wrestling. But for these people, they're having a good time. And the best example of that is a super kick party with the Young Bucks. You went to PWG, you didn't need to be a wrestling fan. You're enjoying this fucking exciting moment with other people. And that's the best example. You've seen the super kick party on video so many times, but diehard fans eventually needed to go fucking witness it. And not just witness it, but go witness it in Rosada, because there's something special about that 40 seconds of witnessing a super kick party in person in that Legion, you know?
at the Met Theater in Toronto, backing up again. That was the first time I had seen Walter live.
Yeah.
And his chop, I had the same exact reaction. I got video of it, and it's insane every time I look at it. You know,
what's crazy is like guys like Walter and like Benoit. There's a couple other people. Good choppers usually nail their chops like 8 or 9 out of 10 times. I think like Walter's like 10,000 for 10,000. He's never had a chop fall short of like devastatingly painful and loud. Like it's always on point.
I can't even remember who it was against, but I was like, it was one of them Friday damn moments. Let me ask you about because a lot of people, you know, we're out of the United Kingdom, even though I'm the North American guy. But a lot of people that maybe haven't heard of Smash or have heard it, are you guys on a streaming service? Some of these older matches, YouTube? Are you guys on Fight TV or?
So, in a weird way, it's the worst time to ask that question. Not because like, no, it's not. It's nice to share why, but it's not that because of the pandemic. But even prior to the pandemic, like if we like work backwards, the pandemic happened somewhere in late March, and SummerSlam weekend 2019 happened in August. So going into that weekend, which is the craziest weekend for me and my team, not just as wrestlers or promoters, but as human beings. Just the prepping for it and the week or two coming into it and then setting up for a few days. And for me, it's like we have 4 days of shows. And then I was an extra with WWE, which was the NXT TakeOver, SummerSlam, Raw, and SmackDown, another 4 days there, while I had shows on those same days. And then the teardown, it's like I had 10 days of my life in like high stress, like where even if you're trying to enjoy being an extra, it's like you have these shows running that you're not physically there now. And it was chaos. But going into that weekend, it's like we kind of had like a month or two prior where we talked about kind of having a bit of a reset after SummerSlam. It's not that things were going bad. It's just that the independent scene is changing, you know, some elements good and bad. And we as a company are changing and things worked for us in the past. And we really wanted to change a few things about our identity. And the thing is like, the easiest way to explain it is like, think about it as like, you work 40 hours a week on the company, then 50 hours and 60 hours, and you're getting good results more often than not, but you're killing yourself, right? And to dumb it down is we really wanted to change our way from working hard to working smart. And part of that also required a reset on a lot of aspects of our company. And it's like one of those things where we wanted to do it before we had to learn the hard way that it's like, it's killing us and it's hurting us, right? So we kind of took like 3 or 4 months there to close off the year from like September to early December, where we only ran shows in the smaller towns, the fairs and festivals, and like we have a student show with like a college where we get the young guys reps. And these shows, you know, you don't have to kill yourself promoting, or the audience is already there. So it kind of gave us our first ever break in like those 7 years. It was crazy, especially coming off that SummerSlam weekend. And so what happened is, and we put our TV deal with Fight Network on pause there, where, you know, our editor was just hammering weekly shows at high volumes and high quality stuff, and with just not matches, but adding external content and video editing. So at that point, we ran a show for Good Morale in December, and like kind of in February, now that we're moving that cat, we were like, all right, let's get back into the rhythm of things. And right then it's like, you know, pretty much we ran one show, and then we came to a few of our staff members and our wrestlers went to Germany and the UK for a bit of a tour, starting with WXW and working our way out to Western Europe. And we were going to start going into high gear when we came back, and the pandemic happened. So but if you haven't noticed, I can't just answer a question in like 2 or 3 sentences. I got to give it a long time. But the gist is, the reason it's like hard to give you like, hey, here, check out our on-demand and our digital content, is because after SummerSlam weekend from August to February, it's kind of like we're on hiatus, and we put our TV deal, which a lot of our online content was our part of our TV deal, right? So there wasn't really content there. And then the pandemic happens, and we decided to like, do we create content and stay relevant during the pandemic? We're like, listen, we were in the process of a big like reset. The the pandemic is almost a reset in itself. We might as well just go all in, take advantage of the fact that we might be back in 3 months or 3 years, and really take our time to go on a full frontal reset. And so we didn't really have content leading into the pandemic and after the pandemic. And it may seem odd to people from the outside, not familiar with our scene here in Eastern Canada, because we're known as the company that's frequently creating content and running multiple events. So check us on, on Facebook, Smash Wrestling, on Twitter and Instagram at Smash Wrestling, our website, smash-wrestling.com. Smash On Demand is our digital content. We're on Fightward Network, and we're also on Impact's on-demand service over there as well. Like, I'll give you the whole works, but a lot of it is our older content. And like, I'd say the easiest thing to do, if you're not familiar, just go to YouTube and type in Smash Wrestling and check out our channel, because we've been very generous in making sure a lot of our high-profile matches or our bigger events have been released for free. We know we can make that exclusive and make people pay for it, but we always believed in continuously outreaching to new fans. So we always ended up putting that stuff out for free after a bit. And there's so much good shit you'll find on YouTube. Like, that's the easiest way. It's nice. Like, our on-demand service hasn't had really anything. And like, it's weird. I'm like telling you not to go there, but the reality is because like, my feeling is, it kind of circles back to what I told you about, like, with too much saturation of podcasts going after, it's like you're not for everyone. There's an audience there for you, and you target them, right? So coming out of this pandemic, 3 months, 3 years, when the time's right, we're going to have something very specific, very special for people. And we're going to be very vocal with the right audience. We're not going to chase everyone in the whole wrestling community. We know what kind of fans we're going to go after, and we're going to let them know what's up, and we're going to put it out there on YouTube and on social media. And like, we're not going to say, come buy a ticket. We're going to say, here's some content for you. We're going to keep giving you good content. There's no catch. There's no sign up. Come check us out. And we're going to make noise. So those fans listening right now, we'll find you, and we're going to give you good shit to take a look at. And I think that's where I'm not worried about, like, whoever's listening right now, please, like, before I lose you, check us out on YouTube. I appreciate that. But I guess it's nice to share with the listeners where we are as a company, because, like, as much as it's nice to play the PR voice with Smash Wrestling and hype us up, I always appreciate a true human story, right? And this is where we are as a company. This is where the key members of our team are at, and we're excited about having a reset. It was this whole pandemic's been horrible, but barring that, everything came at the right time for us to actually just reset, like the whole 9 yards reset, and kind of take a different approach to pro wrestling and not be afraid to do it, and kind of, take our time doing that. And that's where I'm excited about the future. Check us out on YouTube, and I think when the time is right, we'll be knocking on everyone's door about where they can find us. Myself, Sebastian Suave on social media, or Suave Wrestling on Twitter and Instagram. But I'm fairly quiet too. Like, me as a, hey, I don't mean to be negative, but I'm not big on social media, and I hate saying that because it's so important for wrestling. But I've taken the same approach as the wrestler and as the human being with how I've done it as the promoter in Smash Wrestling. So right now, it's like, whether it's the wrestler, the promoter, or the human being, I'm kind of laying very low. I'm focused on grinding behind the scenes. I'm not worried about, letting everyone know what I'm doing and flaunting it on social media. I'm just going to stay low, going to work hard, going to stay at it. None of us truly know when things are turning around in this world or in the wrestling industry. But when the time is right, I'll be excited to put my best foot forward, on a platform where hopefully people can pay attention.
I think that's a perfect spot for us to kind of end up here, because I'd love to talk to you more in another interview, but I'm trying to keep it good for my listeners so they don't have a 2-hour podcast to listen to. But just one final thing, just go over that again one more time, because we'll push it. But the Smash TV on YouTube, Smash TV. What am I saying?
Yeah, like YouTube. We'll have just Smash Wrestling. You'll see our account. I think we have a great deal of our shows on Fight Network. If you really want to catch all the chronological episodes of our shows that were on Fight Network for like a good 2 years or whatever it was, Smash On Demand is our network. But you'll find a lot of good stuff on YouTube as well. And our social media is like, I forced my team not to be active on social media. And I said, we're all taking a break. We're all focusing, like, because everyone was fried. That SummerSlam weekend, like, destroyed us. But yeah, just catch us on YouTube, or if you really want to get all the content and bless your soul for it, Smash On Demand. You Google that, or you go to smashondemand.com, you'll find us.
You're Sebastian Suave on
at Suave Wrestling, if you guys want to catch me on social media.
And you know what? For everybody watching, even though you might be taking a little break, follow these. If you're a tiny bit interested, follow these now. So when you guys come back, we are on.
Yeah, I mean, in the meantime, I make a lot of tweets about basketball and the Raptors. So if you like basketball,
or you guys destroyed my Bucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that? 2 years ago, you guys destroyed my Milwaukee Bucks.
Now we have no centers, and I'm afraid every time we play Giannis, because before I'm like, I was like, well, we have some good defenders. They're tall, they're strong, and now it's like they all left in free agency. I'm like, you can't play small ball versus Giannis. So now I'm full of anxiety on game days. And if I'm not mistaken, we got a double shot with you guys coming up.
I know. I'm trying to think. You obviously have no fans up there, right? Because wasn't it Toronto that wasn't? Sorry, guys that are wrestling fans.
Yeah, you gotta put up with it. Too bad. That's the trade-off for some good Tyson Dukes rating.
That's right. Now, wasn't Toronto, I don't know if it was the Blue Jays or the Raptors, there was talk of them, like, going to Florida because...
Oh, that did end up happening. So it's an issue for professional sports in general. So all professional leagues try to make an exemption where the Blue Jays, the Raptors, the Maple Leafs, they can cross the border, or Canadian teams can cross the border to play in U.S. cities. And the Canadian government was adamant that they're not making that exception. So the Blue Jays played the tail end of last season, and they're probably going to do it again. They played in Buffalo as their hometown. The Raptors are currently playing out of Tampa. So
right, okay, they are.
There's never any games in Toronto. They're the Tampa Bay Raptors kind of right now. And what's really cool and interesting was in the NHL and hockey, because there's seven, I think, Canadian markets, they just created a northern division. So they realigned the whole like divisional, because usually the teams out west, like Vancouver, play with all the West Coast cities. Toronto's in that northeastern region of the New Yorks and the Boston, and Edmonton, Alberta. I think Winnipeg's there with Minnesota and all those guys. But now it's like, and it's not a knock, because there's some great American markets for hockey, but obviously the Canadian markets that have hockey teams, those fan bases are rabid because it's their only major professional sport team, right? So you naturally have 6 or 7 super diehard markets, and they're all like, because hockey is very Canadian oriented, they're very like they're when Canadian teams play each other, there's huge rivalries. So now virtually all 7 of these teams, the whole season, they're constantly playing Canadian teams. So the whole division has been kind of wild, and like fans are eating it up, and like your Canadian rivalries where like they don't happen, like you play a team on a double shot and like it gets chippy, and then 6 days later you're playing them again. It's like, oh, this is like, Canadian fans are eating it up. And even like some of the Canadian players, they're wanting these divisions to say that. The interesting thing that happened was, you never imagined players having to cross over, but what happened was Columbus and Winnipeg made a trade. So now you did have to have an exemption to the Canadian, whether you're a player on a Canadian team going cross-site. So what happened is the American player got traded. He came to Winnipeg and he played quite early. The Canadian player going to the States, because there was like some kind of visa formality, he had to wait on a 14-day quarantine after the trade before he can actually play the game. So it's kind of interesting. So that border has been a pain in the ass for us Canadian wrestlers too, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic.
I always say that during this pandemic, like, the coolest thing probably happening right now is these documentaries that we're going to see on 30 for 30 and Sports Center that's happening right now, kind of behind the scenes of what's.
That's a great lesson for wrestling too, right? It's those human stories. Like I think, like, don't get me wrong, I love the in-ring action. I'm tradition, like I am old, like people don't realize it. I'm old school with wrestling, and I love tradition and history. But it's like, I love the in-ring stuff, but there's nothing better than the good human story. And when you see these 30 for 30s, and in promo work or in a feud, it's like it's really captivating, and that's when the matches, a good match, every punch and every whip and every pin means something because you give a shit about this match and that wrestler and this story so much more. And like it's like I just always think about myself being a Kurt Angle fan or a Shawn Michaels fan when this like they were all awesome matches, but like when there was a good story and all my friends are cheering the other guy, every time Kurt Angle blocked the punch or every time he landed a punch or every time she like, I'm not just cheering, I'm losing my mind. Like you're all into it and like, yeah, like all this beauty, like that's the thing with one of the, I guess, silver linings in this pandemic is every industry from wrestling to pro sports, they're relying more on content creation and you're really understanding the value of what just not content, but storytelling content can do. And I think that's really underappreciated. And hopefully there's a lot of people who can capitalize on that coming out of this.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so much to learn. But yeah, I do miss that storytelling that, every move meant, and all pre-internet, when you were younger and not like, I remember when they would just announce that it was going to be the Junkyard Dog versus Harley Race. And not everybody was on the internet going, oh, they should have, why isn't Junkyard Dog fighting Butch Reed? And this is terrible. Like, I miss that.
Isn't it? Like, people have the opportunity to be more passionate and invested in wrestling with the elements of the internet, but then you're excessively like trying to dictate everything rather than just watch the show. It's crazy, but like I always try to be mindful that it's a blessing and a curse, right?
Yeah, because like I said, I used to be like, okay, we're gonna get Coco Beware versus Butch Reed. That's great. Let's see what happens. One guy I know I said I'd let you go. This is my final question because he's one of my favorite Canadians that's doing it right now. One of the nicest guys I've met, but performing at a high level and been in the business forever. PCO.
Hey, I love that guy.
I love that guy. Yeah,
there's a lot of cool. I was trying to think who you're talking about. And there's so many guys that whether they're my friends or not, like they're wonderful wrestlers and they have a great reputation of being good human beings. But like, I'm glad you said PCO because like we booked him a few times. And not only to me, it's irrelevant that he went balls to the walls and he was so selfless with his opponents. It's we usually run out of Toronto and London. And long story short is London's 2 hours away from Toronto. So most airports for the London shows, you're either going to go out of Toronto or Detroit. And we almost always have someone doing the airport runs. And it's not that I don't want to do it, but like one of my top guys on my staff always tells me that, you try to do everything sometimes. You gotta let other people do. He's like, he knows I can do it, but he's like, sometimes he's like, I know it's not you just getting to talk shop. It's like you're networking with these wrestlers. You're making sure they're accommodated after the show. You're thanking them for having a good time. And if you see one of these wrestlers, pick up garbage or give good advice to a wrestler, walk up to them after and say, hey, I noticed you gave some constructive criticism to one of our boys, or I noticed you picked up some garbage. Thank you. It's like that kind of human rapport actually matters. And he's right. It's like me as a boss, I have, despite the fact that I can do other stuff, that's my priority. And there was this one show in London, for the life of me, the usual guys doing the airport runs couldn't do it that night. And I'm trying to ask other people, and I'm like, we can't fucking have PCO stand here for half an hour and say no one gives a shit about getting you to an airport. So I ended up doing it, and I loved it because he became my best friend. He is such a great human being, and he was saying such kind things about Smash. And it was funny. The more I try to be humble about it, it's like, hey, like we do great things, but like we're no different from everyone else. It's like we're thankful to have good fans. He's like, no, you guys do this great, you guys do that great, and he's like, more importantly, you guys got high character. You're a high character individual. Your staff has a lot of quality human beings. Like, and he was just such. And then talking about his family, and just life stuff. I'm like, the business needs more of this. And it's not the in-ring stuff. It's that a good human. And I think the big part, I assume he was always a good human being, but I truly believe him having his resurgence made a humble man somehow tenfold humble. The amount of humility and graciousness he showed, I assume that's the kind of character he is. But like, it's like, I think when people have their boom where they catapult into success, the cliche is it could get to their head a bit, or even if it doesn't get to their head, they're just another cool person you met. but to the extent of humility and gratuity and kindness and empathy, and this man like giving me his phone number, and I'll tell you a cool story about him. It speaks volume of him. We tried to book him again a third or fourth time, and he was booked, and we lost the other guy in the main event due to he got pulled back due to like a contracted appearance. So I think something like that. And then it was around the same time Ring of Honor signed PCO, so he couldn't. He was told he couldn't do the event. PCO apologized and said, "I'll refund you because like I give guys the monies in advance." And I said no. And the next time I saw him at a show in Montreal, because he was allowed to do like we do television and on the mess, but he was allowed to do the show in Montreal. I see him, and the first thing he does is he pulls out his wallet and he gives me the payback. And like, I said no, but I'm like, this guy's gonna fucking put the money in my pocket. And like, I'm like, and he's like, don't worry. He's like, and he's trying to make me feel like guilty of not taking the money. He's like, I just signed this contract. I'm very blessed. The least I can do. I'm like, what the fuck? How are you so like perfect of a human being? Like, and it's like, yeah, you nailed it right away. I believe you said it like you're one of the good ones, one of the kind guys. And like, I think the crazy thing is he has this reputation of everywhere he goes, right? You're not the first or second or third person to say that, which to me is indicative that everywhere he's performing, he's leaving an impression on wrestlers and non-wrestlers alike, and fans especially, that he's a kind and appreciative and, humble guy, which we need more. And, and it's not like he's a rookie. This is a veteran who was on WWF TV in its prime, right? Kind of cool.
Yeah, great guy. Like I said, he asked us to, we help him. We tweet out every Monday his video, and every time we do that, he sends us the video. Guys, would you be so gracious as to tweet this out? Absolutely, PCO. Thank you very much, guys. When he did his march, his walk to the Montreal Stadium this summer, and I was just impressed. And he sent me a message thanking me personally for being invested in retweeting and stuff. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're great. He was one of the interviews I was nervous because I'm like, am I going to be able to, follow along with him? And it couldn't have been.
I bet it was awesome.
It was awesome. And he's in his car sweating his ass off this summer, and we're talking, and he just goes on. And yeah, he's great. I can't wait to get him on for part 2. We broke the rules though, because he was a Ring of Honor guy, and their PR guy contacted me and said, PCO said, yeah, I'd love to do this. Yeah. Okay. And I'm like, all right, when can we do it? And then all of a sudden he goes, I get a message from the PR guy from Ring of Honor, who's great, Mark. Now him and I get along, but said, this is not the way you do this and that. And I'm like, damn it, PCO, you should have just told me to contact this guy right away. But it worked out good because Mark's given
that happens a lot more than you think. Like, a lot of wrestlers are just appreciative of getting the word out and appreciate the visibility. And they look at it as, hey, they're not going to ask controversial questions. I'm not going to say controversial comments. We're just going to, put over wrestling for a couple minutes. And that's that, right? But then, like, that guy's job is literally the PR of the company. And it's not that he or she is being a dick. It's like anytime there is media happening out of their reach or their scope, it's they have bosses too, right? So then they have to politely come in, and I've seen that happen with all 4 or 5 companies, to some extent at some point, whether it's with us or whether it's with people we know. It is what it is. But I think it's just the culture of wrestling has changed, where it's just not one major company, and like all these guys are getting, 10 years ago, you didn't have these, internet websites or these podcasts reaching out to major stars. And I think for a lot of them, it's cool that the industry is in a place where that can happen, right?
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Beer City Bruiser reaches out a couple weeks later, says, I'd love to be on your show. I said, well, great. I have to call your PR guy. And he's like, nah, fuck that. I can, I'm like, all right. He goes, I know you're good.
He's trying to bury your grave for you.
I was like, okay. So awesome. Well, hey, this has been one of my favorite things that I've done, Sebastian. And I want to say this while we're recording, because to get a chance to talk shop and with the guy in the business, and I feel like we've like I said, we're gonna go 20 minutes, and I could crack a beer right now and go another 2 hours with you. But
I knew that was
snow
gonna
shovel.
happen, and it's my fault. You know, like when I got a vibe that like someone's a good brother, I'm like, yeah, this is gonna go on a bit, and it's not the intent of like, and I made it evident. I owned up to it. I rant sometimes, but the thing
No,
is, I
it's
think
great.
it's for me to get passionate about ranting is you need both sides to connect and have a good time. And so like when there's someone like yourself that I can enjoy talking shop with, I know I'm gonna rant, and there's no timer for me until someone boots me off.
No, it's great because usually I'm the one that ends up ranting, and I'm like, oh, meanwhile, back to my guest. So it's great that we had that give and take. So promise me this, now we can do this again in a couple
Oh yeah,
months. And
I mean, I was gonna ask you the same, brother.
absolutely.